Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I've been watching the Danyliw seminars from afar for many years, and I'm so delighted to finally be here. My impression has been that this is where Ukrainian studies is really thriving, and that has been true to witness. So my paper that you read is adapted from a book chapter in my forthcoming book. So I'm especially looking forward to feedback from this audience, since I normally am not speaking to people who could find Ukraine on a map. So just a few quick notes before I get into the material. One maybe preemptively defensive note is the validity of music as an object of study to comment on discourses of statehood in Ukraine. So there's a closely held tenet in my home discipline, which is ethnomusicology, that music not only reflects but also produces culture. My interest spans not only how the aesthetics of popular music contribute to new modes of perception, but also how prominent Ukrainian musicians leverage their celebrity to make a variety of claims about Ukrainian politics. So, for example, right, the recent kind of speaking tour that Slava Vakarchuk has been on, or his position as a Yale World Fellow. And I'll also just mention that if you talk to the average North American hipster these days, what they know about Ukraine, somewhere on that list right under Chernobyl will be maybe Dacha Bracha, the sort of NPR, National Public Radio in the United States, world music darlings that have been touring North America aggressively for recent years and who appointed themselves ambassadors of the Maidan Revolution to the world. So my point here is that the work of Ukrainian musicians might actually tell us a lot about politics broadly writ. I'm going to cede almost 5 minutes of my time to Ruslana this morning, because I think it might be the most effective way to quickly deliver the sort of polysemic, sonic, gestural, and visual information that these distinct moments in her career were embracing, and also help to wake us up on this Saturday morning. But before I do that, I want to address one thing that might have been missing in the chapter that you read, given that it's part of a larger project. So the book is really theorizing this idea of sovereign imaginaries, by which I mean, and I'm taking here a Foucauldian, basically, or post-structuralist approach to the notion of sovereignty, in which power is distributed widely through the body politic, right? This has spawned a robust literature that I won't review here, but my book basically argues that Ukrainian ethnomusica, so this capacious genre term, is particularly interesting site to examine how Ukrainian artists have articulated visions for statehood and sovereignty through musical practices. So how musicians seek to bring different visions of sovereignty into being through the products of their musical labor and their limited power as celebrities. I frame varieties of sovereignty around 3 broad and interrelated concepts, and that is juridico-political sovereignty, cultural sovereignty, and body sovereignty. What are the stakes of looking at how theories of sovereignty work in music studies? This basically goes against a well-established trope of musical nationalism, or that music can perform the nation. So how does music more broadly oral culture, right, listening culture, fit into theories of sovereignty? How does the trope of musical nationalism fail when we look at spaces of contested or liminal sovereignty, if we look at failing states or among stateless people or those with contested citizenship? But more importantly for this seminar, what are the stakes for Ukrainian studies? And I want to suggest that by moving away from nationalism, musical nationalism, towards ideas of sovereignty, I hope to temporarily decenter or to provincialize, to use Chakrabarty's term, which Mayhill also powerfully engages with in her own study. So I want to decenter these Russian and Soviet-originated discourses in which Ukrainian nationalism becomes maybe too easily reduced to a rabid, xenophobic, essentialist stance, which we've been talking about a lot over the last few days. So of course there's a danger here of slipping into kind of a celebratory mode, and I don't mean to downplay the profound and repeated disappointments of the Ukrainian experience of statehood, but rather to focus on how, as Areshtaga argued in a posthumously published essay called Maddening States, that the state form endures as a modern, quote, screen for political desire. So even as supranational governing bodies, new technologies of warfare, and global capitalism erode state sovereignty. In other words, if we concede that the Ukrainian nation has always been multi-ethnic, diverse in its post-colonial and post-Soviet experiences, diverse in terms of its languages, confession, geopolitical orientations, how does the idea of Ukraine cohere at all? I'm trying to argue that it hinges in large part on the idea of statehood and the many registers of sovereignty, these juridical, political, cultural, and body sovereignties that inform how some contemporary Ukrainians, such as the cosmopolitan ethnomusica musicians I write about, continue to invest in and collectively reimagine a future for Ukraine. So I draw on the idea of wildness, or dikist, as a key term in the lexicon of post-Soviet Ukrainian popular music. So for our purposes today, I want to focus on how Ruslana's 2004 Eurovision win not only introduced this very resonant key term of wildness into the lexicon of post-Soviet Ukrainian popular music, but also how it was manipulated by her over the course of a decade almost. The chapter that you read follows Ruslana's transformation from a marginal figure of post-Soviet Ukrainian estrada to a global, quote, ethno-pop star, to a political activist with ambitions to transform state policy and redefine Ukrainian futurity through an examination of 3 songs. So we're going to briefly watch clips of Znаю Ya from 2002, the Eurovision winning song Wild Dances from 2004, and Wild Energy from 2008. So rather than representing 3 disjunct nodes in the pop star's career arc, I seek to elucidate how these hybrid influences present in the early 2 songs, despite the discourses of ethnic purity that marked them, anticipated the project of civic belonging announced by Wild Energy. And it does this by drawing together diverse national myths, including those of Scythianism, other forms of primordial identity making, and Soviet categories of femininity. And then the chapter also dwells on an ethnographic kind of interlude where I return to the Hutsuls, who are represented in Wild Dances, to have them comment on the discourse of wildness present there, but I won't really be touching on that today. It is in the chapter. So I'm going to move quickly now, I think, through these 3 videos. And thanks in advance to Al, our tech expert this morning, who is making a Mac and a PC work together. Okay. Oh, yeah, here we are. This is Znаю Ya. Thanks. Sort of an abrupt ending, but I wanted to make sure we saw the Hummer splashing into the Cheremosh there. So I interpret this song through the lens of ethnic intimacy, on which I draw on Lauren Berlant's idea of public intimacy and on Hertzfeld's notion of cultural intimacy. What's striking here is that this was primarily at this time targeting a domestic audience, which you can see also in part just obviously through the linguistic choice. And I have much more to say about it in the paper. We're going to move now to Wild Dances, which is the 2004 Eurovision performance that I'm going to guess maybe some of you saw. Here we go. Right. Let's go. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so a very iconic performance here, which provoked a scandal among some Hutsuls, right? In Ivano-Frankivsk, there were attempts to censor sales of the disc. It was also received in a celebratory way by many people. It was indicted as just the worst example of pop kitsch by members of the intelligentsia who called Ruslana out for just the worst sins of post-Soviet Shotovarshchina, etc. I'm not going to get much deeper into it now. Al, is there any way we could quickly toggle back to the PowerPoint? And again, thank you for your patience with the technical stuff here. So I'm just trying to look for, yes, perfect, thank you. This is this kind of in-between stage following the Eurovision victory when Ruslana emerges as an Amazonka, right? She calls herself an Amazonka. She fully embraces this kind of predatory, stern, animalistic warrior woman. And I write about this again in the chapter. So here I'm just going to call our attention to that sticker on the top left where we note that she has recruited the North American hip-hop artist T-Pain, and also Missy Elliott makes an appearance on this record. So this is an attempt, obviously, to cross over into the North American market. Finally, we're going to move to one more video, and this is Wild Energy, which premiered in 2008. Thanks, Al. Sorry for all of this. This will be the last one. And what I'm arguing here is that what we see is this shift. I'll say more in it. Okay, thanks. Yeah, one sec. Shift towards what I'm calling a patriotism of pragmatism. So coupled with this Wild Energy campaign, Ruslana branded herself as a kind of eco-activist. And again, I write about this at length. So let's listen to a bit of this. So as compelling as this is, I'm going to interrupt it here. So briefly, right, the conceit is that Ruslana becomes Lana, this pallid kind of cyborg that has to be plugged into the grid in order to have the energy to be alive. And you see this kind of interplay between the real people who are dressed as the wild dancers of yore and the cyborgs of the present, and it becomes this kind of metaphor for how Ukraine needs to be independent in its reliance on energy infrastructures. So can we just move to the last, oh no, this is me now. Okay, thanks. So the chapter assesses how wildness has defined shifting post-Soviet sovereign imaginaries that draw upon different histories of post-colonial representation and geopolitical affiliation. And of course, I'm assessing this here exclusively through the work of Ruslana, but my broader project looks at many other iterations. Through her controversial applications of this notion of wildness, we witness how musical expressions of wildness become a metonym for changing ideas of Ukrainian statehood between the Orange and Maidan revolutions, first as this desirous vision of Ukrainian identity predicated on ethno-nationalism, which is drawn in particular from this very erotic and auto-exotic representation of Hutsuls and marketed at that time to both domestic and international audiences. And then in this last iteration of Wild Energy as a trope of eco-activism, wildness as a source of power rooted in a civically minded, pragmatic patriotism. So what are the stakes of this argument beyond Ruslana, who is today admittedly a rather marginal figure in the broader world of Ukrainian popular music? And then the question I'm really trying to get here at is, what can popular music tell us about how desires for governance are made manifest in the culture at large? So thank you, and I look forward to discussing.